Russia's bombardment of Ukrainian cities is relentless as Vladimir Putin tries to plunge civilians into a winter of cold and darkness. President Putin's war, approaching 4 years, threatens to draw in all of Europe. Targeting civilians has been an international war crime since 1949. The crimes you're about to see are hard to watch. Putin is hitting homes, schools, hospitals, and 7 months ago, a city bus. In the city of Sumy, bus route 62 takes you to the university, the mall, and on to the airport. The fare is 20 cents. Last April, Palm Sunday, there was only standing room as 2 ballistic missiles bolted through the sky of a clear, holy day. The body is wrapped to preserve the evidence in the hope of a future trial. But a Ukrainian war crime prosecutor wanted us to see it, wanted the world to see the steel corpse where 16 civilians were killed. We climbed aboard with prosecutor Vitaly Doval, who showed us the shrapnel that sliced through the bus. This is from what the military calls an anti-personnel warhead. It's designed to kill as many people as possible. And it doesn't distinguish, Doval told us, whether it's a soldier or a child or a retiree. This little square will not spare anyone, and this is exactly why this is a war crime. The crime scene is a city of 250,000 less than 20 miles from Russia. Most days in Sumy are interrupted by an air raid. And so it was, last April 13th, Palm Sunday, for passengers on bus route 62. Tetiana Porhalova was taking Lisa to her grandparents. Lisa is a little girl, she told us. She wants to pick her own outfits, and we are always late. I wanted to catch that bus. The next one wouldn't come for an hour. Natalia Ternitska and her son Maxim were headed to the mall. It was the day before my son was going to have his school picture. We were going to buy some nice clothes. On one of Ukraine's holiest days, the bus happened to be on Peter and Paul Street. At the same moment, a warhead was bearing down with great precision at 2,000 miles an hour. One blow on more than a dozen cameras. It got dark inside, Natalia told us. My ears started ringing. People were shouting to open the doors. The first thing I thought was that I could feel my body, Tetiana said. I thought, okay, I can feel everything. Lisa is screaming, so we're alive. Lisa's screams carried on into the street. Tetiana is saying to her daughter, "Wait, my little sunshine. It's going to be all right. You have a little cut. A little cut." Tetiana told us, everything looked destroyed. I saw broken branches, there was the smell of burning and soot, and there were people lying on the ground. People who, you understand. Maxim told us, in the front of the bus, everyone was dead. I was walking on dead bodies. I urged him to leave me and run, but he said, no, That's never going to happen. He broke what was left of the window with his feet so we could escape. That's Natalia and Maxim, among 25 surviving passengers. Many others on the street were cut down. In the lower right corner, a 47-year-old musician, a pianist, Olena Kohut, had watched the bus pass. Hit by shrapnel, bleeding out, she would live 2 more steps. Altogether, 35 civilians killed, 2 children, and 145 wounded. Prosecutor Vitaly Duval responded from his church. He told us, "I have never seen such a horror in my life." Duval said, "Lots of people were lying on the pavement. I saw that bus that had burned." Duval told us, "It was all mud, dust, blood, crying, and bodies." You seem to be saying this isn't war. This is murder. In my opinion, yes. It is just unimaginable to use such powerful, high-precision weapons in the central part of a city. Duval's investigation shows there were 2 missiles, among the most accurate in the Russian arsenal. The first wrecked Sumy State University's conference center. The second, Peter and Paul Street. They're among hundreds of Russian war crimes, and we have seen many over the years in Ukraine. A school in Chernihiv, a hospital in Izium, apartments in Borodyanka.
Mr. President, I'm glad to see you again, sir.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Last April, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy met us on a playground where a missile killed 9 children and 10 adults. All of those, so many more, and now this, make Ukraine the largest crime scene in the world. Ukraine's top prosecutor told us that the number of war crime investigations now open at the beginning of the fall is 178,391.
They are systemic, literally everywhere that Russia's troops have been deployed. And we're also
Few know the big picture like Beth Van Skok. Until recently, she was U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice. She directed American support for Ukraine's investigations.
Attacks happen in towns and villages where there are no discernible military objectives. The attack seems to be calculated to make as much destruction as possible and to terrorize the civilian population. So it's an effort to subjugate and to terrorize the community in order to get the country to essentially capitulate.
The reason for Russia's terror is to take back territory it lost with the fall of the Soviet Union. Ukraine won independence 34 years ago. It's a democracy about the size of Texas. Of all of the crimes here, Putin faces 1 arrest warrant. In 2023, the International Criminal Court charged him in a campaign against Ukrainian children.
He is accused of abducting Ukrainian children in a systematic way. It's a war crime. It's a war crime of unlawful transfer of civilians, and in this case, dozens and dozens of Ukrainian children.
And these children are being kidnapped?
They're being kidnapped. They're being subjected to Russification, to military training. They're forced to deny their Ukrainian roots, and ultimately they're often put up for adoption or placed in foster homes in Russia.
What is the point?
The point is to ultimately undermine the idea that Ukraine is an independent country and to raise these children as Russian children who deny their own cultural heritage.
Putin and his allies who are secure in Russia are unlikely to face justice. But Ukraine is holding trials. There have been 211 convictions, many Russian troops, though nearly all of the defendants are at large. Still, prosecutor Vitaly Doval has patience. He showed us where evidence for future trials is warehoused, including crashed drones and mangled missiles. On each part, we find a serial number. We identify the part where the part was manufactured and when this missile was assembled in a factory. In the Palm Sunday massacre, serial numbers, like fingerprints, identified Russian ballistic missiles with 1,000-pound warheads. Ukrainian intelligence pinpointed the Russian units involved. Doval told us, "We already know the individuals who gave the orders to carry out the attacks." Do you have any reason to hope for justice? I am convinced that those responsible for the strike at the central part of the city on Palm Sunday will be punished. The military commanders who made the decision to launch these missiles, I am convinced. Natalia Ternenska told us, "They're killing civilians. It's elimination of the Ukrainian nation. They're just wiping our cities off the face of the earth." We interviewed Maxim and Natalia, Tetiana and Lisa in the conference center destroyed by the first missile. We could see where the warhead crashed through to the basement. The Russians claim they were aiming at a military awards ceremony, but prosecutor Vitaly Doval says that doesn't explain how no troops were hit and why 2 missiles fell on civilians. You have quite a stake in the future of Ukraine, and I wonder, what is your hope? Tetiana told us, "I would like the Russians to answer for what they've done. I don't wish death on those people. I want them to learn how it feels to live in fear. I wish Ukraine could see the end of the war. And I want people to be able to live in their own homes." That's it. Near our interview, we found a room where it looked to us like a victim may have fallen. Close by, in the bomb dust on the table, someone had drawn a line. We don't know what they meant, but with so many innocent victims murdered without justice, perhaps the question was why.
Tonight, Scott Pelley in Ukraine with President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
The Ukrainian president faces a critical moment in his alliance with the United States. In an interview this past Friday, Volodymyr Zelenskyy invited President Trump here to Ukraine to see how Russia's unprovoked invasion 3 years ago continues to threaten the peace of the Western world. Zelenskyy is navigating a sharp turnabout in Washington. The United States had been leading NATO in arming Ukraine and isolating Russia, but since taking office, President Trump has praised the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and criticized Zelenskyy. This past Friday, a Trump official met Putin in Russia about the same time we sat down with Zelenskyy in his hometown. It had been a week since Russia killed 9 children on a playground. You seem to have a real hatred of Vladimir Putin.
Putin?
100% hatred, not even 99.9%, Zelenskyy told us. Though this doesn't mean we shouldn't work to end the war as soon as possible and transition to diplomacy. But how else can you see a person who came here and murdered our people, murdered children? We're inside a school bomb shelter right now, the bomb shelter of a school. The bomb shelter classrooms beneath the city of Kryvyi Rih were silent. School 41 was mourning its students killed on April 4th. Swing sets, pierced by shrapnel, stood where Zelenskyy laid his memorial to the 9 children and 10 others cut down by a Russian missile. He asked us to look at their faces and told us that while the great powers endlessly debate war and peace, these children will never speak again.
Mr. President, what does an atrocity like this tell you about the progress of the war?
It means that we can't trust Russia. We can't trust negotiations with Russia.
Russia strikes Ukrainian cities daily. 1,700 attacks on schools, 600 children dead, 780 hospitals and clinics attacked, 13,000 civilians killed, and up to 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers dead. All for Vladimir Putin's vanity war to expand Russia to NATO's doorstep.
Наші люди платили найбільшу ціну.
Our people have paid the highest price possible, Zelenskyy told us. There is no higher price. We have given all our money, all we have in terms of finances, but most important, we gave the lives of our people. Those were the points Zelenskyy struggled to make in February as President Trump opened negotiations with Russia and initially excluded Ukraine. Then, Trump rewrote history, saying falsely that Ukraine had started the war and calling the democratically elected Zelenskyy
a dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction.
When President Trump called you a dictator and said that Ukraine started this war, what did you think?
Я вважаю, що, на жаль, русські наративи
I believe, sadly, Russian narratives are prevailing in the U.S.
як можна бачити
How is it possible to witness our losses and our suffering, to understand what the Russians are doing, and to still believe that they are not the aggressors, that they did not start this war? This speaks to the enormous influence of Russia's information policy on America, on U.S. politics, and U.S. politicians.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now.
And Zelenskyy told us he heard Russia's narrative from Trump officials in that disastrous Oval Office meeting in February.
You're gambling with World War III.
Zelenskyy grew tense as President Trump said both sides were suffering, Ukraine's people and the Russian invasion force.
зміна тональності, зміна реальності.
It's a shift in tone, a shift in reality, really, yes, a shift in reality. And I don't want to engage in the altered reality that is being presented to me. First and foremost, we did not launch an attack to start the war. It seems to me that the vice president is somehow justifying Putin's actions. I tried to explain. You can't look for something in the middle. There is an aggressor and there is a victim.
Русський агресор, ми жертва.
The Russians are the aggressor, and we are the victim. Vice President Vance suggested that Putin could be trusted, and it was Zelenskyy who was creating a false narrative.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring people, you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President.
Would you invite President Trump to Ukraine?
With pleasure. Please.
This, Zelenskyy apparently wanted President Trump to hear in English.
We want you to come and I think to come and to see. You think you understand what's going on here. Okay, we respect your position. You understand. But please, before any kind of decisions, any kind of formats of negotiations, come to see people, civilians, warriors, hospitals, churches, children, destroyed or dead. Come, look, and then let's move with a plan how to finish the war. You will understand with whom you have a deal. You will understand what Putin did, and we will not prepare anything. It will not be theater with preparing actors in the streets and etc. We don't do this. We don't need it. You can go exactly where you want in any city which has been under attacks. What I said to them, just to come and to understand.
With his invitation on its way, he switched to Ukrainian. Does the United States have your back?
Навіть в моїй цій паузі є проблема. Тому що я дуже
Even in this pause of mine, there's a problem, because I want to answer truthfully and quickly that the United States is our strategic, strong partner.
А ця пауза – це
But the pause is
я
doubt.
не сумніваюся, що
I don't
люди
doubt that the
Америки знають.
people of America are with us, but in a long war, many details are forgotten.
Але в Європі всі бояться, що Сполучені Штати можуть
In Europe,
віддалятися
everyone
від
fears that the
Європи.
United States may drift away from Europe. Can you do without the United States?
Я думаю, що
I think without the United States, we will suffer great losses, human and territorial. So I wouldn't like to consider that.
я б не хотів би
But
розглядати
this is our destiny, our land, our life. One way or another,
доля,
we
наша земля,
will end this
наше
war.
життя.
The U.S. has donated about $175 billion in aid. Roughly $100 billion of that was military, most of which was spent in the U.S. on manufacturing American weapons. What would you say that the American people have gotten for that money?
Завжди вважали,
We have always believed that this is our shared struggle, that Ukraine is defending our shared values, that we are defending Europe as a whole.
але я можу тільки подякувати.
I can only thank the people of the United States of America for their support, their strong support. But the people dying right now, with all due respect to the U.S. and Europe, the ones dying right now are Ukrainians. This is why I say that by giving us weapons, other countries are protecting their own people. But in the Trump administration, U.S. aid has all but stopped. Last month, the White House announced partial ceasefires, but they haven't happened. And now Trump says he is losing patience with Putin.
Передусім не можна вірити.
Putin can't be trusted. I told that to President Trump many times.
І я вважаю, що це несправедливий підхід. І тому
So when you ask why the ceasefire isn't working, this is why. Putin never wanted an end to the war. Putin never wanted us to be independent. Putin wants to destroy us completely, our sovereignty and our people.
не хочу про
Putin's troops occupy about 20% of Ukraine. The 600-mile front is largely frozen. World War I trench warfare, plus drones. It's estimated that as many as 200,000 Russian troops have been killed. What does a just peace look like to you?
безумовно не втратити нашу суверенітет і нашу
To not lose our sovereignty or our independence. We, no matter what, will take back what is ours, because we never lost it. The Russians took it from us, the temporarily occupied territories. We will not recognize as Russia those territories that the Russians temporarily occupy. We will bring them back. When or how, I cannot say. But what we can't bring back are the human lives. There's only one thing that can be done: justice.
справедливість. Не можемо
We cannot let go the issue of justice. Those who killed, must pay for the murders. Zelenskyy told us any true ceasefire must include a guarantee of Ukrainian security. He imagines an international peacekeeping force and would like the U.S. to be part of it. This could mean a force protecting airspace and providing air defense, which may consist of airplanes rather than boots on the ground.
I will end the war in Ukraine immediately. I will get it done while I'm President-elect.
During his presidential campaign, Trump boasted he would end the war before Inauguration Day. Instead, today, Palm Sunday, Russian missiles struck the Ukrainian city of Sumy. At least 32 civilians are dead, including another 2 children. In your view, what is at stake in this moment? Security. The security of the world is at stake. If we do not stand firm, he will advance further. It is not just idle speculation. The threat is real. Putin's ultimate goal is to revive the Russian Empire and reclaim territories currently under NATO protection. And the United States, being part of NATO, means it will be involved in any potential conflict. Considering all of this, I believe it could escalate into a world war, a risk to the world. Yes, for the world. There won't be a safe place, not a safe place for anyone.
A most dangerous war took a perilous turn on Friday. In what was planned to be a brief, cordial greeting, President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy squared off in the Oval Office and left an alliance shaken. For 3 years, the West has stood against Russia's unprovoked invasion of an innocent country. Ukraine is a vanity war for Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, who covets an empire. And for that alone, more than 1 million have been killed or wounded on both sides. President Trump has boasted only he can end it quickly, but in the last 2 weeks, his chaotic attempt alarmed allies and encouraged enemies. By Friday, he was scolding the man who stands between Russia and the rest of Europe.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
The meeting itself was a gamble, and the public had never seen anything like it. The president dressing down Zelenskyy, whose people had done all of the dying to stop Putin short of the border of NATO. Vladimir Putin watches the video from the Oval Office, and what does he see?
Vladimir Putin couldn't be happier, Scott, because what he sees is all of the pressure on Zelenskyy, all of the pressure on Ukraine, and no pressure on him.
H.R. McMaster knows. He was National Security Advisor in Trump's first term. He's a retired Army general, senior fellow at the conservative Hoover Institution, and a CBS News contributor. The allies look at the video from the Oval Office and see what?
What they see is something that's just confounding, a discussion that doesn't reflect the reality of the war in Ukraine, the degree to which this war is a crime against humanity. And they think, how can President Trump be berating the leader of Ukraine while he says kind things about Vladimir Putin?
We have seen those crimes against humanity in mass graves of Ukrainian civilians and in their obliterated cities. Behind a murderous front line, Russia occupies 20% of Ukraine and bombs all the rest. American-led sanctions isolated Putin. But last month, President Trump flipped U.S. policy on its head. He opened peace talks with Russia and did not invite Ukraine. At the same time, he spread a deceitful history of the war.
But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Ukraine did not start the war. Next, the president said this.
We gave them, I believe, $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's a lot.
It's $122 billion, not $350. The next day, Trump went after Zelenskyy.
A dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction.
Zelenskyy is not a dictator. He was elected in 2019. There hasn't been a vote since because of the war. On February 24th, Trump's tilt toward Russia reached the UN, where America voted against its allies and sided with Russia and North Korea, opposing Ukraine. Alarmed, the leaders of France and Britain hurried to the White House. In these last 2 weeks, we've heard him call Zelenskyy a dictator. We've heard him say it was Ukraine that started the war. What is going on?
Well, President Trump, as we all know, has a tendency to say outlandish things. Sometimes that's to shake the situation up and create some sense of change. But oftentimes what he doesn't consider is how his words could impede his own agenda, or how his words actually can cut against U.S. interests or be received abroad in a way that's much different from the way his political supporters will receive those words in the United States. And so those words were damaging to the psyche of the Ukrainians. You know, war really is a contest of wills. And I think what you're seeing is Donald Trump delivering a series of body blows to the Ukrainians in a way that could affect, their will to continue to fight.
Zelenskyy's will to fight led him to push for the meeting Friday. Trump had demanded Ukraine sign over the rights to billions of dollars in mineral wealth to pay America back. Zelenskyy came to sign the deal.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have President Zelenskyy of Ukraine.
President Trump began generously.
So I give tremendous credit to your generals and your soldiers and yourself in the sense that it's been very hard fighting, very tough fighting. They're great fighters. And you have to be very proud of them from that standpoint. But now we want to get it over with.
These public Oval Office meetings are planned for weeks with issues settled in advance, but this was hasty. Neither side was prepared. Trump spoke of loss in the war, both the victim and the aggressor.
They're not American soldiers, but they're Russian soldiers and they're Ukrainian soldiers, and we want to be able to stop it.
Zelenskyy seemed irritated when his people were equated to the invading Russians.
Whether they're in Russia or Ukraine, think of the parents of all these people being killed needlessly.
They came to our territory.
Should have never started.
Trump helped arm Zelenskyy in Trump's first term, but now he has all but cut off aid. Trump is pushing a quick ceasefire without an international guarantee of Ukraine's security, which is Russia's position too.
I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world. I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred.
Protocol prevailed for 40 minutes until Vice President J.D. Vance said diplomacy could have ended the war long ago.
The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Vance had struck a nerve with a man who has buried tens of thousands of his countrymen. It got worse when Vance told Zelenskyy he'd seen Ukraine on TV. Zelenskyy explained that Putin, a, a mass murderer indicted for war crimes, could not be trusted. A ceasefire without a security guarantee would be naive.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
It was the White House that called in the media. Ukraine's ambassador couldn't bear to watch.
The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing.
Immediately after the meltdown, many Republicans rallied around the president, saying Zelenskyy was at fault. But Republican Congressman Don Bacon has worried about Trump's approach to Ukraine since last month.
I hope it's not as bad as it sounds.
Congressman Bacon represents Omaha. He's a retired Air Force general who knows what America means to NATO.
America's the leader of the free world. We're the indispensable power. Nobody can stand up to Russia and China if we're not a part of that. And Ukraine's the victim. And I think Putin's made clear that he wants to reestablish his old borders. And that's not in our national security interest. So to me, this is a national security issue, but also a moral issue.
Would you say that Donald Trump is appeasing Vladimir Putin?
Appears that way, though I can't get into his motives. I don't know his motives. Some people think he's doing this for negotiating and maybe help get a better deal. I don't know. All I know is what he says. And when he says that Russia is not the invader, that's Ukraine's fault, that's just wrong.
Is there danger in this?
Yep, there is. I fear what this means. We came out of World War II, the dominant power, the indispensable country for freedom. We've had NATO. And I worry that this framework is going to collapse.
When the United States sided with Russia and North Korea at the United Nations, what message did that send?
Well, the first message it sent to me was shame.
Senator Angus King is an independent from Maine, serving on the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees.
I always try to think of, what's the argument on both sides? I cannot think of a rational argument for pulling our support from Ukraine.
Senator King likes to point out that Europe has given more than the U.S., and Ukraine has given the most.
They've done the dying. All they've asked for us is to send them the means to defend themselves.
In this moment, what should Congress be doing about Ukraine?
I think they have to start speaking up, because if we persist in walking away from Ukraine, it will be the greatest geopolitical mistake that this country's made since World War II.
Back in the Oval Office, President Trump revealed something of a common cause with the Russian president. Trump complained he and Putin had been slandered for years by allegations that Russia helped Trump's campaigns, allegations Trump ties to his Democratic opponents.
Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting.
That rant was familiar to Trump's first-term National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster. McMaster left the White House after 13 months in a falling out with the president. But even back then, he was warning Trump about Vladimir Putin.
He appeals to President Trump's sense of aggrievement, right? Donald, like me, you've been treated so unfairly. And he's been very successful at it because he's a master manipulator and one of the best liars in the world.
You seem to be saying that President Trump is being played.
He is being played. And he's being played like other presidents have been played, like other leaders have been played, through that same playbook of Putin's.
Today, the Allies stood with Zelenskyy. In London, a flash summit was arranged with leaders including those of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the head of NATO, and the British Prime Minister, who announced new negotiations by Britain and France, potentially taking the lead for peace out of the hands of President Trump.
All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think?
President-elect Trump has vowed to solve Russia's invasion of Ukraine with a simple negotiation. Tonight, Holly Williams reports from Ukraine and introduces us to a man who knows better than most how complicated that war is.
For more than 2 decades, Andriy Tsaplienko has been a war reporter, travelling to conflict zones around the globe. 2.5 years ago, war arrived in his country, Ukraine. When Vladimir Putin sent Russian tanks and missiles across Ukraine's borders, Tsaplienko became a trusted source of information from the front line. He's as fearless a journalist as they come. Some of Ukraine's military leaders told us they're surprised he's still alive. Tsaplienko told us he's fighting for Ukraine's survival, using his reporting and the truth as his weapons. Andriy Tsaplienko is battle-scarred and limping. Yet, like his country, he refuses to stop. Close to Russia's border last month, he filmed Ukraine's 80th Air Assault Brigade. With birch forest as cover from Russian drones, they showed him their American-supplied Stryker fighting vehicles. 19 tons of armour-plated steel, topped with a .50 caliber machine gun. He reported that the Strykers are helping the Ukrainians to storm Russian positions. One soldier said Russian landmines 15 yards away feel like a slight rustle against the armour.
Being a witness of what's important going on right now, that's for me.
You like the front row seat of history?
Even more, I'd like to be in the middle of the story and to share this with the audience. So they are also witnesses of what is going on. This is important. My channel, they always want me to be in the studio as an anchor, as a host. I always refuse to be like that because I'm a field journalist. I feel myself in the studio like a doll in a box.
Tsaplienko's graphic accounts from the field for the privately owned channel 1+1 have shaped how many Ukrainians see the war. He's told stories of heroism, but also turned a critical eye on his own country, revealing how some Ukrainians paid bribes to government officials to avoid the draft.
Freedom of speech, very important. It's a crucial thing that helps us to win this war.
A free media is helping you win the war.
Free media system helps us to win this war and will help us to win this war. Because we fight not for the government. We fight not for a particular person like Russians do. They fight for Putin. So we fight for ourselves and we fight for our identity. We fight for our country and for values because we want this country to be free. That's it.
Andriy Tsaplienko has some history with Russia. He grew up as a citizen of the USSR in the city of Kharkiv, even doing national service with the Soviet military in the late 1980s. But at home, he was listening to American rock music and told us he worshipped American democracy. In 1990, he posted leaflets with his friends calling for Ukrainian independence from Moscow.
It was a kind of real rebellion because we expected that KGB could come to us and knock to the door.
That must have been dangerous.
Yeah, we were waiting for the consequences, but fortunately, there were no consequences at all.
Instead, a year later, the Soviet Union collapsed. Tsaplienko told us he felt he'd finally been set free.
In the new, independent, democratic Ukraine, Tsaplienko became an international war reporter, one of Ukraine's first. Beginning in the 1990s, he broadcast from Iraq and Afghanistan, Gaza and West Africa. He told us he learned how easy wars are to start and how difficult they are to stop. In February of 2022, with over 100,000 Russian troops massed along Ukraine's border, and 10 days before Vladimir Putin launched his invasion, we interviewed Tsaplienko in central Kyiv. He'd experienced Russia's earlier invasion of 2014.
I travel to the east, almost every week. And there's some friends of mine here.
He showed us the Wall of Remembrance, a memorial to those killed since 2014. Just days before the Russian invasion, we interviewed you, and you said Ukrainians have already made their choice between war and dishonor. Every window in this town will shoot at the invaders. And Andriy, that turned out to be prophetic. You were right. How did you know?
I know my people. Sorry for my emotion. We will live or we will die, that's it. I know my people, and they are like this.
Andriy Tsaplienko has come close to losing his life. Outside the town of Chernihiv in 2022, civilians were fleeing through a narrow humanitarian corridor. The Russians began shelling. And Tsaplienko took a shrapnel wound to his leg. I report from a lot of war zones, but I don't really take the same kind of risks that you take. Why do you take such huge risks?
We are sitting in the studio. Do you think we are safe now? No, there is no safe place in Ukraine. We are under threat of Russian missile attack. Stop this recording, stop our lives, stop your peace, stop everything. It's possible. Hello.
Tsaplienko told us he sleeps around 4 hours a night and hasn't taken a day off since the invasion. His contacts inside Ukraine's armed forces are more than just sources. General Serhiy Deineko is the commander of Ukraine's state border guard, a decorated war hero, and one of Tsaplienko's closest friends.
The audience that Andriy reaches, we're talking about millions of people, he told us. He is really respected, both on the front line and by Ukrainian society.
So you're fighting a war on the ground, while Andriy is fighting an information war by reporting the truth. Is that right?
Of course.
The truth, according to Tsaplienko, is that Ukraine is doing battle against evil.
So I raised myself around $2 million for Ukrainian military. It's not that much, but I think it helps.
You're not an unbiased observer of this war. You're on one side of it.
I'm not unique. I think every Ukrainian journalist took his side in this war. We know that Russians treat us and information soldiers of this war. And we know that we will be killed if we're captured by the Russians. So that's why we choose one side. Normally, before this war, you have to give 2 points of view to the viewers to help them to decide what's right, what's wrong. But it's not like this in this war. We still have corruption problems. That's true. We still have problems in bad managing. That's true. But we are on a good side of history. That's it. We protect values.
This war is personal, and Tsaplienko makes no effort to deny it. In the city where he was born, Kharkiv, residents are under near daily bombardment by Russian missiles, drones, and glide bombs. more than a quarter of Kharkiv's residents have fled. But for those who've stayed, civic pride is non-negotiable. In Freedom Square, in the centre of Kharkiv, the fountains are still working. Despite air raid alarms like this one that sent us scrambling for cover. Nothing landed that day, but just over 3 weeks later, the building where we took shelter was shattered by a Russian glide bomb.
I'm just gonna bring to my mother something.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
On the outskirts of town, in a district that's frequently bombed,
Mama, yeah.
Tsaplienko took us to meet his mother, Valentina, a retired shopkeeper. She refuses to evacuate.
What will you do if the Russians come here?
Я не верю в то, что они придут сюда. Они не должны прийти, мы их не пустим.
She says that Russians will never come here. Never. We will not let them in. Never. My mom.
Like around a third of Ukrainians, Tsaplienko and his mother speak Russian as their first language. Kharkiv is a majority Russian-speaking city.
Vladimir Putin says that the Ukrainian nation doesn't actually exist. He says that Ukrainians are really Russians. Is it possible that you're really Russian and you've been brainwashed?
I'm totally lost my answer, actually. How can you brainwashed identifying yourself? Nobody can force you to be identified as anybody.
I mean, Vladimir Putin said that this war is to defend and protect people like you, Russian-speaking Ukrainians.
Protect from what? This is standard propaganda cliche. They want to kill us. They mostly destroyed Russian-spoken regions of this country. They turned them into a desert of debris and remains of concrete buildings, soaked with blood. This is what they do, what they continue doing.
Putin's blood-soaked invasion has cost the lives of over 100,000 Russian soldiers, according to US officials. Ukraine's military death toll is now thought to be more than 70,000. The wall of remembrance has extended much further down the street. Andriy Tsaplienko told us the freedoms Ukraine only recently began to enjoy are what these soldiers died for, and the reason he keeps going back to the front line.
We realize how vulnerable it is. It could be broken, it could be destroyed, because we live next to Russia. We know how it works. That's why I do my news, I do my reports, I write my articles.
So it's not a job for you, it's a calling.
It's a calling, it's an obligation, it's a dream job. If you can help your army to win, if you can help your people to survive, you can be proud of your job. That's it. That's what I'm trying to do.
You were never meant to hear the voice of Vladimir Kara-Murza ever again. The Russian opposition leader had warned for years that Vladimir Putin would threaten the peace of the world. And at the UN General Assembly in New York this past week, leaders were debating how to stop Putin in Ukraine without a world war. Putin poisoned Kara-Murza twice, then sent him to die in prison. But last month, he was traded for a prize that Putin could not resist. Why does the Russian dictator still fear Vladimir Kara-Murza? Here's why.
I think Russia deserves so much better than to live under a corrupt, repressive, criminal, archaic, KGB-led dictatorship. And change is not going to happen unless we do something to make it happen.
And this is worth your life?
I mean, look, there were people who stood up to apartheid in South Africa. There were people who stood up to the communist regime in the Soviet Union. There were people who stood up to the Nazi regime in Germany. there are causes larger than ourselves. And to me, the cause of a free, peaceful, civilized, and democratic Russia is certainly much larger than I could ever be.
He has fought for that cause from the start of Putin's 25 years in power. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post and Cambridge-educated historian. Last year, 43-year-old Kara-Murza was tried for treason after denouncing Putin's war on Ukraine.
We try to warn the world. We try to shout. We try to get the message out that this regime is dangerous, that this man is dangerous, that even if you don't care about what happens to us in Russia, it's going to come to you sooner or later.
What is it like living in Russia today?
Anybody who is a genuine opponent of Putin is either in exile, in prison, or dead. You have to think about even what you talk to your kids about at home, because children whose families are against this war in Ukraine would, for example, draw anti-war images in school, and their parents would get visits from the police, or they would be put in prison. You have to think about that as well if you live in Russia today.
Vladimir Kara-Murza has been high on Putin's list since 2012, when he and the late Senator John McCain fought for the so-called Magnitsky Act. The U.S. law is named for a man murdered by Putin's police. The Magnitsky Act seized the overseas assets of more than 60 people who abused human rights in Russia. Kara-Murza says this is why he was poisoned by Kremlin assassins.
I was in a coma for about a month the first time this happened in May of 2015, with a multiple organ failure, and as the doctors in Moscow were telling my wife, with about a 5% chance to survive. And after I came out of that coma, despite all the odds, I've literally had to learn everything anew.
You had to learn to walk again?
Yeah.
You had to learn to eat again?
It's amazing how fast the human body just loses everything, just loses all the strength, and you just have to start anew.
2 years later, he was poisoned again. This time, 2017, he rehabbed in the U.S. His wife and 3 children live in the States, and Kara-Murza has permanent resident status. But once he recovered, he returned to Russia. You were safe.
How would I not go back to Russia? I'm a Russian politician. A politician has to be in their own country. How could I call on my fellow citizens, on my fellow Russians, to stand up and oppose this dictatorship if I myself was too scared to do it? How is that possible?
Last year, after his treason conviction, he was hit with the longest sentence ever for a political prisoner. The judge in the case had been among the first officials ever sanctioned by the Magnitsky Act. And when you heard the sentence, 25 years, you thought what?
So frankly, I thought it's a job well done.
Job well done?
Well, on my part, yes. I think that 25-year sentence was, frankly, a recognition that what we did over all those years mattered, that the Magnitsky Act mattered, that public opposition to the war in Ukraine mattered.
He was sent to Siberia and solitary confinement.
In the 2.5 years I've spent in Russian prison, I was only able to once call my wife on the phone, and only twice I was able to speak on the phone to our 3 kids. It was a 15-minute call, so 5 minutes per child, and as my wife later told me, she was standing there with a stopwatch to make sure that each of our kids doesn't get more than 5 minutes, so that everybody could have an opportunity to speak with Dad.
Were you sitting in that cell thinking, I'm going to get out of here one day?
No, to answer your question honestly, I did not believe I would ever get out. And so what happened on August 1st, the only way I can describe that is a miracle.
The miracle was in the making for more than a year. Negotiations began over Americans held by Putin, which eventually included Evan Gershkovich, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. But over the months, the deal grew to involve 7 countries.
We don't trust the Russians on anything. They lied about the war in Ukraine. They make a regular practice of lying and obfuscating. But one thing they have shown over time is when they say they're going to do an exchange, they do the exchange.
At the center of the negotiations was Jake Sullivan, President Biden's national security advisor.
None of this happens overnight. None of it's straightforward. There's going to be twists and turns. There's going to be false starts. And so persistence, relentlessness, that's part of the name of the game of actually securing the release of these Americans.
But there was only one thing Putin wanted, and that would be hard, maybe impossible, for the man who held the key, the leader of Germany.
Olaf Scholz was absolutely critical. Without him, this would not have happened, because a central piece of the puzzle was the release of a Russian agent named Vadim Krasikov. Without Krasikov, there is no deal.
But Krasikov is a notorious assassin and friend of Putin. In 2019, he was sent to Germany to kill an enemy of the Kremlin. The daytime murder in the middle of Berlin was infamous. What was Scholz's dilemma?
Being able to look his people in the eye and say, we are releasing someone who has committed a grievous crime on German soil, and therefore I can deliver something for the people of Germany. And that's why we ended up thinking through enlarging the problem, not just trying to bring out Americans, but of course bring out some German citizens as well. And then the critical move of being able to say to the German people, the American people in the world, we are also getting Russian freedom fighters out, including people like Vladimir Kara-Murza.
That was the fireside pitch to the German leader, but Krasikov had served only 3 years of a life sentence. Scholz's fractious coalition government faced election challenges, and the easy answer was no. In the end, you had to do a deal with the devil.
I made a deal with the Russian president.
In Berlin, Chancellor Scholz told us he was brought to yes by a man he considered a friend.
It is not an easy decision. And I discussed with many people in my government, and especially with Joe Biden, who asked me to help. And my view was that this is something which we could do, well prepared, and if we do it on a large scale.
He said, and I remember it very vividly on the phone with President Biden, for you, Joe, I will do this.
A large group of officers bursts into my cell. I have no idea what's happening. It's the middle of the night, it's dark. And they tell me I have 10 minutes to get up and get ready. And at this moment, I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to be let out and be executed.
But instead of executed, on August 1st, 8 Russian criminals and spies were traded for several Germans, the 3 Americans, and 8 Russian dissidents. As he stepped off the plane in Turkey, Kara-Murza's captors had parting advice.
He turned to me and said, be careful about what you eat. You know how these things happen.
He was telling you you might be poisoned again, even though you're free.
Well, look, we know that attacks on opponents of the Kremlin have happened far beyond the borders of Russia.
The next voice Kara-Murza heard spoke not of fear, but of freedom.
At that moment, a lady diplomat came up to me with a cell phone, and she says, are you Mr. Kara-Murza? I said, yes. And she gives me the phone and says, I'm from the American Embassy in Ankara. The President of the United States is on the line.
You've been wrongfully detained for a long time, and we're glad you're home.
With President Biden was Kara-Murza's family.
We're in the Oval Office.
You've done a wonderful thing by saving so many people. I think there are 16 of us on a plane. I don't think there are many things more important than saving human lives.
It felt surreal. It felt more emotional than I had ever felt at any point in my life.
There had been many emotions for Jake Sullivan, who for years could tell desperate families only to keep waiting.
And most of the time, as you can imagine, those are tough conversations. But not today. Today, excuse me. Today was a very good day.
You know, it's one thing to speak about protecting freedom or protecting human rights, but it's quite another thing to actually do something to protect them. And whatever else President Biden and Chancellor Scholz will be remembered for years from now, they will be remembered for this.
Vladimir Kara-Murza told us he quoted a Jewish scripture to you. He who saves one life saves the entire world.
It was very nice to hear it, to be very honest with you. On the other hand, I don't feel that great. I did what I thought is the right thing to do.
We have traveled quite a bit through Ukraine. We have seen the destroyed hospitals. We have seen the shattered schools. We have seen the mass graves. Vladimir Putin has attacked a country that meant him no harm. And I wonder if you can explain why.
Because that is what dictators do. Once they consolidate, they control domestically. Once they eliminate and destroy all the opposition at home, they start moving against others. This has always happened in Russia, whether under the Tsars, under the Soviets, or now under Vladimir Putin.
Will Putin try to kill you again?
Look, we know what it entails to be in opposition to Vladimir Putin. He's not just a dictator, he's not just an authoritarian leader, he's not just a strongman, he is a murderer. That man is a murderer.
Vladimir Kara-Murza remains in the U.S. with his family. He told us in solitary confinement he learned there's no life without hope. True for those behind bars and for his imprisoned country.
The amazing fact, and the fact that frankly makes me proud of Russia, is that there are thousands of people in Russia who have publicly spoken out against Putin's regime, who have publicly spoken out against the war in Ukraine, even at the cost of personal freedom. And I hope that when people in the West, or when people in the United States, when people in the free world at large think about Russia, they will remember not only the aggressors and the war criminals who are sitting in the Kremlin, but also those who are standing up to them, because we are Russians too.